Alright, in today's video I'll be discussing the 12 cranial nerves. So, as I implied, each person has 12 pairs of cranial nerves. I'll be listing the 12 names of the nerves, but just know that each of the nerves that I name, there's 2 of them because they come in pairs. So, each of these nerves originate from the same part of the brain called the brainstem, which consists of the medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain. Now, these 12 pairs of cranial nerves are numbered from the inferior part of the brain from top to bottom. It goes 1 to 12. Every one of these cranial nerves has a name, classification, and a function, and the cranial nerves are numbered with Roman numerals. So, starting off with number 1, we have the olfactory nerve. Olfaction is just a scientific word for smell. So, implied from the word olfactory, we know that the function of the first cranial nerve is smell. And this nerve is classified as a sensory neuron because it senses smell. Name, classification, job description. Moving on to the second cranial nerve, we have the optic nerve. As you may know, this nerve senses vision. So in my sentence you could hear I use the word senses. So we can tell that this is a sensory nerve. And its job description is vision. So this nerve we often use, just right now I'm using my optic nerve to see this writing. Now following the optic nerve, we have number 3, the oculomotor nerve. This nerve is not to be confused with the optic nerve. It is important to differentiate that the optic nerve senses vision, whereas the oculomotor nerve is a motor nerve that forces eye muscle movement and pupil constriction. The oculomotor nerve is not a sensory nerve, it is a motor nerve because it controls eye muscle movement. It is not sensing anything. The fourth cranial nerve is the trochlear nerve. This nerve is also a motor nerve, similar to the oculomotor nerve, because it also controls eye movement, but in a different way. Because the trochlear nerve controls eye movement out, in, and downwards. So this applies to lens accommodation. So when you're getting adjusted to seeing something further away or closer to you. The fifth cranial nerve is the trigeminal nerve. Now this nerve is quite complex because it has both sensory and motor functions. As you can see, as I labeled in the job description here, it has ophthalmic sensory functions, maxillary sensory functions, and mandibular sensory and motor functions. So that's why I wrote both for motor and sensory. An additional function of this nerve is chewing, otherwise known as mastication. The sixth nerve is the abducens nerve. This is the third and final nerve responsible for eye muscle movement. However, the abducens differentiates from the oculomotor and trochlear nerve because the abducens controls lateral movement of the eyes, so for example going cross-eyed or lateral, side to side. And the abducens nerve is classified as a motor nerve. Here next we have the facial nerve, which is classified as both a motor and sensory neuron, because in its job description here we can see that taste is sensory, facial expression is motor, and finally secretion of saliva is motor, as well. Name, classification, 3 job descriptions. Roman numeral number 8, vestibulocochlear nerve. This is a purely sensory nerve. The 3 functions are balance, hearing, and equilibrium. I've drawn a small arrow here between balance and equilibrium to exemplify that they're basically the same thing. The next in order is the glossopharyngeal nerve. This is another example of a motor and sensory nerve because the 2 functions, taste is sensory and swallowing is motor. Moving along to the 10th cranial nerve, we have the vagus nerve. This is the longest cranial nerve in the human body. It is also probably the most important cranial nerve. First of all, it has sensory and motor functions. It carries sensory information from the pharynx and epiglottis, but it also sends motor output to control voice production and swallowing. The vagus nerve is highly involved in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest method. So heart rate drops because of this, and also gastrointestinal tract activity rises. So the parasympathetic is the opposite of the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, which would be the fight or flight system. The 11th cranial nerve is known as the accessory nerve, sometimes called the accessory spinal nerve. This nerve is purely motor because it has 2 functions involving the movement of skeletal muscles. So there is head turning, which is of course like this, and shoulder shrugging are the 2 functions. And a way to test if this cranial nerve has been damaged is by pushing down on someone's shoulders and seeing if one side is stronger than the other, so testing the strength of the trapezius muscles. Now, last but not least, we have the hypoglossal nerve, the 12th cranial nerve. It is a purely motor nerve that controls tongue movement, so specifically the muscles underneath the tongue, allowing the tongue to move in different directions. Alright, those are the 12 cranial nerves. I hope this video helped you. Thank you very much.